Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our podcast, How to Stay Married So Far. And what else could we do other than how is our relationship surviving and your relationship surviving?
In lockdown.
In lockdown.
Or for some people in quarantine, or for some people, how's you? I mean, the other weird thing about this conversation is...
We haven't said the first weird thing about it yet.
Well, what is the first weird thing?
I don't know.
The fact that we're in lockdown now.
Yeah, I suppose. Just the whole premise.
The whole premise that we're in lockdown is strange. But just want to... Often at the beginning of like a 12-step meeting, they'll say, let's take a minute to remember the still suffering alcoholic or addict who's out there. And I wanted to take a second just to think about the fact that before we get going on the trials and tribulations of living with your partner, there's a huge number of people in relationships who aren't
separated
with their partners, absolutely. And that ranges from the youngsters like Maddie and through to
Your
young
oldest?
adults and
Is he?
my oldest, exactly, young professionals, young kids and young adults, all
And people, and lots of
cleft in
people,
two.
lots of people have contacted us on our social media platforms that are actually divided by country as well. You know, or my
absolutely.
husband was working in America, or we have a friend who recently got married, and they've not had one day together, have they? Since
So I kind of wanted to say that as a caveat that we're not in
that we are
talking about
understanding of that.
in talking about the complications or difficulties of being with your partner in lockdown. We also recognise that the most fundamental, there's going to be a vast number of people who just wish they were with their partners regardless of the pressures.
Yeah, and of course those pressures when you're separated, it's like our daughter says, you know, God, but if we should see each other, we'd just get this sorted out in 2 seconds. So it's not just about, oh God, the aching for love and if only we could be together. It's actually a lot of relationships are cracking up in separation.
So this is about love in the time of Corona.
Or non-love.
Or non-love. Or a love that is no more. Or a love that's... I mean, I keep hearing, I don't know if you're hearing this, I mean, I keep hearing more and more stories of people who are, I mean, really struggling. I mean, like, really struggling. I think calls into various sort of marriage counselling services have gone up. People are talking about the D word. I think calls to lawyers have gone up. I think there's a general malaise and an intolerance creeping in. Because I suppose it is so profoundly unnatural to only be with your partner for such a large amount of time.
Well, we know someone, obviously we'll have to keep them anonymous. We know someone, don't we, that's been married for the last 20 years. And we and everyone that knows them knows it's the most terrible relationship, marriage. I mean, no violence or anything, but you could see they're not happy.
Yeah.
But, you know, and sometimes on a girls' night, we might discuss with her, well, do you not think, maybe it might be a good idea to maybe think about whether you should stay together, you know, those sorts of girly conversations. And it's always like, no, you know, we're very happy, thank you very much, Well, a week into lockdown, the divorce word came up, a week. And it's interesting because actually what she has realised is that so much of her life is about distracting away from what she's unhappy with him. So when work was taken out, when all the girls' nights were taken out, because sometimes, like, often with a girls' night, a lot of pressure within the relationship can be taken away because it's like, oh my God, he's driving me mad. Oh, me too. And that shared sense of...
It's an outlet.
Yeah, it's an outlet. And so I think that's a really important part of what's gone from a woman's point of view for a lot of women, and certainly this person that we know. And, you know, they're now absolutely going to get a divorce.
And you feel social media, or not social media, but these sort of FaceTiming apps and platforms, do they not provide us a sufficient...
Well, I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about if you are a group of women that outlet a lot about your partners, then how do you do that in the house?
Yes. Yeah.
Because there's not many people that can be in a house and not be heard.
That's a good point.
I mean, we've got a good-sized house, and yet we can hear everything in every single room. So there's no way that you could go and have a private conversation in this house. And I think that's the same for probably 98% of the population.
It's tricky, that, isn't it? Because I think men spend most of their time not thinking about it, but trying not to think about it because they dread to think about what women actually say to each other about them. And I'm sure in a similar way, though not as much. Do women worry about what men say about them to each other?
No, not really.
Because I think women dismiss
Because I
men's
think-
thoughts
because-
as a little bit simple.
Well, I don't worry about it at all, because I am very sure of our relationship and what you think and feel about me. So if you were to say to your male friend, "Oh my God, she's absolutely bloody driving me mad,"
Yes.
I know that would just be an outlet and not actually a comment on who.
Right.
Whereas if we were in a very bad place and you were. And I wasn't sure of what you felt of me deep down, then it would be difficult. But I think that people have to understand that in relationships, you have to be able to, I mean, look at the way that we discuss our children, all our relatives. You have to, because you have to discuss what's going on.
Yeah.
And so I do feel sorry for men in that men don't seem to have those kind of, in the same way, those relationships. So on a girls' night out, there's probably going to be one person that's having a really shit time and a couple of other women that are going to be able to say, "Oh God, I know, well we were a bit like that at this time, but now we've done da-da," and that's all gone. All that conversation is gone.
Can I just ask, I'm curious, this is interesting. You know, when women, girls, I hate the term girls, it's so sort of like, I don't know why, it's sort of like
prefer girls to
infantilizing.
ladies.
But when you're out with other women and you're talking like that, and you know that one in your group is, under the cosh maybe, or is struggling or needs to share with you guys, does it make you others want to sort of hide whatever the successes of your relationship are? Is there a sort of impetus to kind of just share in the bad?
Well, no, no. I mean, I think when you're younger, it's really, really different. And I remember when I was younger and people used to, I've always been one of those people that people would come and tell me their problems. And I used to love sorting out people's problems. So people would come to me and go, "Oh, well, this is probably what you should do." And with age, I've learned that you absolutely don't do that unless somebody asks you directly.
Right.
So I try and just listen and sympathise. And it's like one friend of mine, I'm sure she won't mind me saying her name actually, Donna, she goes, "God, you're always on the side of the men." And actually, she's so wrong with that, because what I'm on is the side of the woman.
Right.
So like if a woman is saying to me, "Oh God," and I've said, "Well, maybe he's feeling like this, and maybe it's da da da." Because that's the new me. The old me would have gone, "Oh, he's a right bastard," and leave him.
Right,
but actually, most people want to work out where they are. Most people want to
Yeah.
be happier with the person that they're with. And most people don't want to hear another person go, "Oh, what a nasty fucker he is."
Right.
So...
Because I do sometimes wonder in the complaining about relationships. And I think this is the case with men too. It's almost like the done thing. You would not turn up. When I think back to when I used to meet up with friends drinking and there'd be little interest in going, "Yeah, it's all going great." There'd be very little interest in that. People are generally sort of only drawn to the problem. So you're not going to meet up with people and go, "Do you know what? I'm having a really nice time with my partner." You won't. You'll just talk about other stuff and it won't come up. You won't talk about what goes well in a relationship.
No, I would, but you are mindful because you just absolutely know when somebody's unhappy.
Yeah.
So there are the sorts of people that will go on and on about their partners and say how wonderful and how everything. Not people I know now, because I don't. I'm talking about in the past.
Yeah.
And I would always be quite suspicious of that. I'd think, "Well, why are you having to tell everybody that when there's a girl over there crying about it?" So it's just about getting a balance. It's just about being a good human being and picking your. If somebody wants to share in your joy, you share in it, but you don't shove it down people's throats, because you don't know what's going on for people behind closed doors.
Absolutely. And would you say that's one of the most challenging elements of this lockdown? It is how we find those connections with other people who are close to us outside of this bubble, which can become an incredibly intense bubble.
Well, I mean, we've been through the ups and downs of lockdown relationship like everybody has. And I would say that I feel very lucky that we've worked out a lot of our shit. But certainly week one was difficult, very difficult for me, because I was just crazy. Then I sort of calmed myself down a bit because I knew I couldn't sustain it the way I was. And I said to you and the girls, didn't I? I've lost it. I'm just gone. I'm not coping well at all. And I just put stuff into place. And then I think for the first few weeks after that, we were both just at sea. We were like
agitated.
We were agitated, and we were dealing with it in a different way. And at times I really did feel absolutely trapped. I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do? What am I going to do if Mark wants to listen to the news all day and have horrible stories? What am I going to do if every morning he wakes up really down, because there is no escape? Because you are somebody that does, you tend to wake up.
Naturally, you're right. I naturally
more
wake up
unhappy
in
than
a
I do.
half empty
I might be
place,
more unhappy around 4 o'clock. You know, we have our different, everyone has their rhythms.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think the rhythms that could normally be allowed because there's other stuff going on, you're in the same rhythm. And so if at 4 o'clock is kind of my low point. It's the time that I want sugar. It's the time I feel tiredest. It's the time I feel weary with it all. I'm much more in the morning. I'm full of hope. Every morning I'm full of hope.
Which is interesting because
I'm full of industry, and I want to do everything in the morning, and then I drop around 4. That's weirdly the time you quite often do your exercise. And I look at you and I think, how can you exercise at
absolutely.
4?
I always find that I'm building. I think 3-4 o'clock in any day is a difficult time for most people, and I like, this is classic addict, isn't it? I like to conquer that moment. I like to be completely counterintuitive as I'm hitting that moment where most of us, and if I'm in a work environment, I do too, hit that ebb and I'm like, oh God, it's a toss up between passing out asleep on the sofa or forcing myself to do a 30-minute hit. So I do the 30-minute hit, and if you think about it, why am I doing that? I'm doing that because it's like a shot of adrenaline, and it sustains me through the evening.
Unhealthy.
It's probably unhealthy.
Think about that article you were reading yesterday where they said, don't do that. So what I've started
the propaganda of productivity.
That is terrible. I'm not going to let you do that. So what I've done is I now sort of go upstairs at around 4 and I don't feel guilty.
Yeah, no, that's good.
I just lie around. I might read, Kiki quite often comes to the room, we have a little chat and a giggle. I might scroll through Instagram. I might do a bit of shopping, and that's actually working for me, and I stop. And then I re-energise again for the evening. But before that, we've got into this sort of rhythm. I think we felt at times both very dark with each other's moods.
I think we both felt,
how do we fit in with them?
I think the word I would use, and I think this is a problem for anyone living together for such a long, period of time like this. It's the feeling that whatever your approach to something is at that point is somehow being hijacked, whether intentionally or unintentionally. It can be intentional. It can be intentional insofar as, you can have one half of a couple who wants attention, who wants to be cared for or noticed or looked after and all that kind of stuff, which is just hideous when you're attending to yourself. It could be that, unintentionally hijacking because I am, say, in the morning feeling I need to really build to a place of gratitude and satisfaction with things because I'm mulling stuff and, I'm going through what I think the bloody meaning of it, or whatever that stuff is.
It's funny how we totally do that. I do all that, but I just do it later in the
absolutely.
day. It's the circadian rhythms
and those rhythms. So if you imagine those rhythms, so at first, you're right, where I'd be on a peak, you'd be on a trough. And so the distance between us is quite obvious. And I don't know.
I think it's interesting that we found a way to distance ourselves at that time. Obviously, we can't in the morning because the morning is the time when we do stuff. But the afternoon, the fact that you're pushing through and driving yourself, I'm going to work with you on that.
I know, but at the same time, don't work.
Why don't you have it as a time?
Don't work with me too much on it because it works for me.
No, it does.
And it does help my mental health at a point in the day when I am hitting a bit of a kind of a lull, and I do like having the synapses in my head. So there's all of that. I mean, my heart does go out to people. To a number of people have contacted us in terms of a partner of theirs or one half of the couple is just drinking a lot more. And I was thinking about this, especially as I was talking to someone a couple of days ago on social media about what I might talk about in a chat about sobriety. And I'm big on this idea that you don't need to drink to be alcoholic, or to be white-knuckly or to be difficult to be around. You know what I mean? You don't need to necessarily just be drinking, but drinking is the most obvious symptom of dealing with this stress. And I was trying to think about how I would have coped if you turned to drink more. And I think we often talk about what it would have been like if I was drinking, but that's such a hypothetical. But I'm kind of staggered and amazed that you haven't turned to drink more than you have. Well, no, insofar as there's all bets are off. The rules are out the window. The game of sort of the field of play is so completely different to anything we've been in before. And I'm not saying that that's a relief, but I think a huge number of couples are undergoing this really difficult experience.
I've got a friend and she's saying every day it's getting earlier and now it's
There
4
you
o'clock.
go.
They pop the
There you
bottle
go.
open like you would on holiday. And I've
Yeah.
said this before, I think it's because when we first went into lockdown, we were set on the wrong foot because it was the Easter holidays.
Yes.
People had holidays that they cancelled.
Yeah.
It was sunny and they
Yeah.
thought, sod it. If we were in our villa now, we'd be having a bottle of wine and a bag of crisps. Let's do it. And then people can't really are struggling to get off that. And yeah, lots of people have contacted me as well and said, I think we should do a whole separate podcast on how are you dealing with your partner's drinking in lockdown? Because I think it's such a huge
Well, it's
subject.
so rich.
Let's do that for
Yeah.
the next week. I think that's a really
But
good
would you
one.
say my alcoholic behaviour has kind of dissipated that sort of white knuckling, or
Yeah,
I
I think
do you
it-
definitely know when it's coming? Because I'd have thought that's the closest the reason I'm mentioning it is not to bang on about bloody alcoholism again, but is to find the parallel in our lives to people struggling with someone who's actually drinking too much.
Well, I really, yeah, at one point when it was the most difficult between us, I felt like you were the most white knuckling that I'd seen you in a long time. And I completely understood that because everyone was turning to drink.
Yeah.
Of course, it's like Denise Welsh from Loose Women. She said it was the most challenging time of her 8 years of sobriety. Not that she wanted to go and have a drink. She wasn't
No.
even thinking of having a
No, I
drink,
wasn't.
but she was the most challenged.
Yeah.
And you were the same. And I felt very desperate at points. I was like, oh my God, there was a couple of times where I went off and had a cry because I thought, I don't know how to deal with this. And then I think I begged you to go to an AA meeting.
Well, unfortunately, you did a monologue for the vlog that I watched. I mean, what a curious way to message me.
Oh, God, that's
it was
right.
when it was actually me editing your commentary in one of our earlier vlogs about worrying about me, and I was crying whilst editing, and not in a sobbing,
No, but in
a tear rolled down my cheek as I realised, oh my God, this is.
Why, what hit you?
Well, what hit me was how tenderly you were talking about it. I was thinking, okay, she's really worried. She's really worried. She's concerned. She feels that she's done as much as she can. She doesn't quite know what to do beyond what she's done. So it's, I can be quite literal sometimes. I thought, so the onus is on me. I can't not hear this.
Well, I think the thing was, and it's like I've said this to you quite often over the years. It's like, I can take it if you're depressed. I can take it if you're anxious. But the most difficult thing for me when you get anxiety is that I can see the route you could go is like, I'm really anxious and I'm feeling really this, and we could really connect over that. But what happens is you go into this protection, you tighten, and you get very sharp, and you get cross, and you can't see that you're cross. And that's my definition of white knuckling. It's like that's where somebody might have had a drink and just relaxed a bit, and because you can't have that drink and have relaxed a bit, you were getting more and more and more irritable. And I thought, and I don't know if you remember, one day I went to the door and I went, 6 weeks, I won't be able to do 6 weeks of this, because it was like quite early on. And then that was the day that you went into the car and you did a vlog and I did a vlog in here. And actually I was a lot angrier than I was very careful in the way that I shared that, because I didn't want to diss you on the, out in public apartment, but I was actually really angry and I talked to myself. And the reason this is relevant, I think, if you're listener, is I think where we all go wrong in our relationships, and God, Mark and I do every day, is that we don't sometimes we don't interrogate what our anger actually means. It's like anger is a valid emotion, but usually there's something underneath it. So I was getting angrier and angrier, but actually I was getting more and more scared, and I was getting more and more unhappy. So I talked myself down from being angry before I did that message to you. And obviously not everyone's on social media. So maybe the way that you could apply this to your lives is write a letter. Like if I hadn't have done that film, I would have written a letter probably to you or an email to you and said, listen, I don't know what to do next. I can see you're suffering, but you don't realise that those that love you are suffering around that as well. And you went to an AA meeting.
Well, no, I did. But also it was interesting because I think it totally parallels.
An online
It's
AA
like
meeting.
our own experience as a household in which I don't drink anymore. It's like our own experience, I hope, or would have thought for a lot of people out there, what they're going through with the partner who is drinking too much. Because I was demonstrating the similar behaviour. That's what white knuckling is about, So I was snapping, and when I heard you say that, and I was thinking about it, I did feel, going back to where we were at that point, 2 or 3 weeks in, I was aware that the simplest of things were really igniting me. I mean, I was really, you know, and I'm not a like fast, snappy person. I'm not like that. I can be a bit moody. I can be a bit sulky. And I
Your
like
fuse was very short.
Yeah, my fuse was incredibly short.
Understandably.
But my fuse was incredibly short. And so, you know, I think an important note to anyone listening is a lot of the emotions that we're all feeling individually, we've got to recognise that whatever kind of couple you're in, you are individuals first, and necessarily so. And in your individualness, I love the word, when you actually interrogate the word selfish, it's never good to be selfish, but there is a sense of, you can only have a true sense of yourself.
Yeah.
And so to be selfish is to be like, you know, to know one's just oneself. And so if your partner or someone you're with, without alcohol, is getting angry, I think you just have to often just trust, or if you're feeling anger, and this is one of the most dangerous things in couples to do, is you feel anger and you park it on the person opposite you.
Yeah.
And it's not them. I think what you say, it's very hard to kind of, as you're feeling rage, if you can just stop the rage coming up and ask yourself, is this actually about what they're doing? Or is this actually about the entire situation, and what they're doing is their own way of coping?
But also is the anger because you don't know what to do with the sadness and the fear. So you've transferred it to anger, because anger can keep us, you know, can keep us up, can keep us buzzing, can keep us moving, can keep us safe. Because when you're angry, you're safe because you're just like, you've closed yourself in, and it's actually really difficult to sit down and break down what you're angry about. You see, you can't ask for what you want in a relationship if you don't know what it is. This is what I say to the girls. I say, work out what you want. If you're unhappy, what is it that you want? And how can you maybe ask that within the limitations of your relationship? Obviously, we communicate very well, so I'm always mindful of the listener that's listening, that has somebody that doesn't want to listen. And I think that that everybody probably knows quite well their partner's limits. So you work out what those are. If you're with somebody that you just never can have a conversation like this with,
Must be very hard.
Yeah, but you know what? You maybe also have an incredible power there, because maybe it's been years that you've approached them with anything.
Right.
And maybe they will listen. Now, I do think it's very, very difficult to get somebody to sit down and listen to you. I'm a great advocate for maybe writing a short note even, not writing a big letter, maybe writing one sentence, maybe leave a few notes around the house, just saying, with no accusations. You've got to say what you would like, how you would feel, what you think maybe they would like, what maybe where we're all going wrong. That sort of language will get you much further on.
Well,
I can't take any more.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's all the same stuff, isn't it, really, that you go through. I mean, every single situation is a 50-50 situation. You know, even if one person's lazy and you can't tolerate it and then you blow, then you have to ask questions of why did you allow that laziness to keep manifesting itself? You know, there are always two sides to a problem. There are always two sides to a problem. You know, it's like the enabler or the person who allows bad behaviour. You could just say it's the person with the bad behaviour, but you keep going back in and you keep sanctioning that bad behaviour. So I think there's always a way. If you accept that whatever the crisis is that you're going through, or the difficulty that you're going through, that you are responsible for some part of it, then you can just get on with trying to work out what that is.
So that you would say, so instead of saying, can you clear up or can you not do? If you said, can we maybe?
Find
if
a
you
way.
always make it we,
that's true.
then you don't get people's backs up. The one thing you don't want to do in lockdown is to keep getting each other's backs up, because we could be doing this for a lot longer.
I tell you, one of the most stressful areas...
Sorry, I've just got a cough.
I think one of the most stressful areas that a number of comments have come through about in terms of relationships and love in Corona are sort of bending of the rules for each other's families, or different situations with each families, and the pressure. So we all have issues with in-laws. You know, I mean, fortunately we don't have that many, but it's always there's a pressure point there in a lot of families about whose side of the family kind of comes around more and all that kind of stuff. And a number of people are talking about the fact that, you know, this crisis puts a really strong spotlight on those cracks and issues in partnerships. So it's quite, I think,
Sorry, I don't understand.
well, insofar, like down to things like, the bubble, the who do we see, how can we see people.
So those conversations that are happening now are getting uncomfortable already. Yeah.
Exactly, uncomfortable. So it's putting another, I think people sort of, it's too strong a word. Fortunately, I love my mother-in-law, but people who loathe their mother-in-laws or have problems with them, the prospects of having to sort of have them come and live with them, or the prospects of not seeing them or being able to kind of not deal with them at all is like possibly quite preferable.
Because it's just absolutely every single crack that was there is just got fingers
Amplified.
in it, opening it and rubbing, or every wound and rubbing a bit of salt in it, because there are no distractions. There's no going down the pub. There's no going off to a restaurant. There's no going out with your mates. There's no cinema. There's no theatre. There's nothing. There's no work. There's no... I mean, everybody, it seems to me, in the world has already cleaned their house and done all their garden. We've still to do that. Yeah. But how are people distracting that used to distract? It's like a friend of mine was saying the other day that a friend of his had called him and said, I can't do it. We're going to have to get a divorce. And he was like trying to calm down and saying, listen, look, it's lockdown. It's really, really difficult. Everybody's, stressed and strained. She went, no, we don't have a single thing in common.
Well, what do you do when you realise that?
That is scary, because we're sitting here talking about people that maybe fundamentally want to be together, but there's a lot that's being shown up in their relationship that they've realised they've had to attend to. That's one set of thing.
But then there's
the other one that just goes, the other set that goes, we've got nothing in common. Yeah. We've been high.
So, I mean, that could be a eureka moment.
Well, it could be.
And a justified eureka moment. I mean, one thing we're not saying this, that's why So Far is in it, is that you don't just stay in a relationship for the sake of it if fundamentally it's not the relationship that you should be in. So what if you are one of those people who right now is facing, and denial doesn't just happen around addiction. Denial happens mostly in relationships. You can deny,
because it's so very complicated to break up, whether you're renting a place, whether we've bought a place together, kids. You don't have the choice, do you, to just walk away? And now everyone's got that feeling with lockdown. I mean, there are people breaking up left, right, and centre.
But there are people still conducting infidelities within lockdown. I mean, I find that, but then of course I suppose you think about it.
Well, think about all the people that are having affairs.
Yeah.
And now it's just going on their phone. I mean, it's just people are going through hell. Hell. This is hell. This is hell for so many people.
So really what this is an amplification and almost a speeding up, a time-lapse speeding up of whatever the cracks were and are in your relationship.
Of course.
They're just getting faster and faster and faster. And in a weird way, the difficulty I'd have thought for many people is there's no real potential, I don't know if there is, to reach out to a marriage counselling service in this crisis, is there?
Well, I mean, I think that's what's got to start happening next. They've got to start off in that, because it's the problem is every single aspect of life and the world is at breaking point.
Yes.
And we talk a lot on our channels about our fear for the wave of mental health conditions that are coming in. Yeah. Well, divorce is a huge problem, not just for the people that are in it, but for the wider community and the wider world. And that sets off a whole new
because people keep talking about that.
Well,
and also I think there's a slightly different sort of dynamic at work, because I keep hearing parallels with, the Blitz, and how there was the baby boomer generation came about due to, the lockdowns during the bombings and all that kind of stuff. And people have obviously remarked that given that we've all been at home, there was a kind of pink cloud, as they call it, at the beginning of, we're all at home and there's a lot of sex happening. So they reckon there's going to be a bounce in births at Christmas. But we are a different generation to the war generation. The war generation was about knuckling down, getting on with it. And okay, maybe not with all the touchy-feely, emotional, psychological, mental welfare type of stuff. But people stayed together because it was the done thing, morally, economically, and socially. We're in a different situation now, where I think you're right. I think the idea that you just stay together and make it work, this crisis is going to result in so many more divorces. And I think the baby boom idea isn't necessarily going to stack. We could end up having a bounce in babies and a bounce in divorces. And
well, I'm sure the marriage guidance counsellor and all that are doing online sessions. But I mean, I think for people that are listening in and that know that we've had a marriage of many bumps, because I think all marriages do. I think it's the same old. It's like, if you cannot communicate, if you cannot open the lines of conversation, it's going to be incredibly difficult. And that maybe the way to see the problems in your relationship at the moment, they were there before lockdown. Like, there's not this, if you're having problems now, they were there before and they weren't being seen. So maybe a pinhole of light is to say, maybe this is an opportunity that we have this time to work on our marriage. And you might think, I don't want to work on this marriage, I hate her or I hate him. But actually, this is a point of no choice. Nobody's getting divorces at this time.
No.
So maybe you've been backed into a corner. We've all been backed into a corner where we have to address the shit that we were putting the carpet over and hoping it wouldn't smell.
I'm gonna say something that's a bit contentious and a bit derogatory towards my own gender, but by and large, but by and large, I would say it's probably men are more resistant to the idea of sitting down and having a big emotional conversation. So. You know, they dread it. But what I would say as a line of advice to women is that if you're needing and wanting and really feel a desire to kind of connect with your partner, but your partner is a bloke, like many blokes I've known, and like I used to be, a bloke who doesn't really want to engage with it, and it's a bit, treat them a little bit like you would a teenager. Think of leading them into that conversation with something nice, like it's you both having a nice meal, or you're having a nice time or something, or you're doing something that's a little bit more sort of, you can guarantee that you're both on the same page somewhat. It might be that you're watching a film together, or you say, let's have a bit of a date night tonight. I know it sounds like, then you're going to kind of hijack it with some big heavy shit. But as long as you're not saying you want to split up, you just want to connect.
But when I say that, when I say to you, can we talk about something, right? You always go, oh, God,
no, but
what is it?
I'll give you...
So what is a better way for me to say it to you?
Well, not to say it like, can we talk about something?
Then what should I say?
You don't even need, you can be a bit cleverer than that. You can just, if it comes up naturally, just look up for that's something that I've been meaning to say, actually. If you
But you will say, you've often said this, we were having a nice time and now you've brought this up. So I've actually consciously made decisions sometimes. Why don't we just talk about that rather than it being something
here's
nice?
an answer to that. Perhaps both ways are appropriate at different times. I think you just have to judge the situation. I think in some situations, you'd probably, if it's a big enough thing where you have to say, look, can we just have a sit down and a talk? I think most men are going to react badly to that. I don't as much because of all the therapy we've been through and the fact that I'm thinking, okay, I don't want to hear it, but I'm going to know what I'm going to hear is going to be good, you know. But I think if you've got someone who's diametrically nothing about them is even this way inclined, it's very tough. It's very easy to sit here sometimes.
Very tough.
I'm not saying
That's
we
why
are
I'm
in
saying
an
just
ivory
start
tower,
it with a couple of lines. Start it with a line on a note.
Yeah.
Just say, can we?
But you see, the beginning of raising a problem might be that you don't even need to deal with the problem, because you might say, look, honey, can we just take a bit of us time tonight? And in taking that us time, without talking about anything, it might be a nice enough experience.
Can I ask you this question then? Because this is what a lot of women would say. If I do that, he will immediately think I'm talking about sex.
If you do what?
If I say, can we have some us time? Like, there's one friend of mine who says, she goes, sometimes I really want to cuddle up with my husband and I really want to, but she said he immediately reads that as sex. She says, and the thing is, if he would just let me and if he would just cuddle me and if he would just, we would get to sex, but it's immediately about sex.
Okay, well, my advice on that would be, if the bloke in the situation is that way inclined, don't tell him that at that point.
Don't tell him what?
Don't say, if you're cuddling up or you're wanting to have a nice evening, don't. If you're in the situation of an evening cuddling up, or just don't cuddle up with him if you don't want sex. If you know that's what he's going to think.
No, but if you say even us time, men tend to think that. Well, men often think, oh, you mean you want to have sex?
Well, it's dangerous. I mean, what's tricky with men, and this is where men and I get embarrassed for our gender, is it depends on the bloke. I mean, you could say, look, this isn't about sex, honey. This is about, I just want us to spend some really nice time together. And I just want us to talk, and I just want us to watch something.
Loads of men won't understand that.
Yeah, no. Well, also, loads of men, if they hear it's not about sex, will be like, all right, I'm going to give my friends a call later then. I mean, I don't know what you... In that situation, I literally don't know what you do. I literally don't know what you do. Because it's why I don't have that many male friends, if I'm honest. If I'm honest, because I can't relate to that. You've got to be able to have you know, if you can't imagine that there's intimacy without sex, then I think you've got a problem. There's a problem there. All I'm saying to some women is that there'll be some men who you need to be a little bit wily how you get to topics.
Oh, of course. I mean, and it's not just, and I'm sure it's the same with you and me. I think that's relationships. That's emotional intelligence. You know, different. Like you can have 5, 6 different children, and each one of them you would need to approach them in a different way to basically get what you want.
Yeah. I mean, what I would recommend in this lockdown situation is, like, we went for a walk in the park the other day, and I'm finding it really beneficial. I found it really beneficial to walk away from the family.
I like to do that sometimes.
And I felt I really needed it. Not because anyone's making any demand. I'm the most annoying member of the family. So, and I'm like the puppy that's constantly like, come on, this is fun, this is silly, and I recognise that. But sometimes, if I'm honest, sometimes that within me is a performance too, because it's my way of keeping the morale up, distracting. I love to make the girls laugh, and I find it fucking exhausting sometimes.
Well, you do it a lot.
No, and I do it a lot.
We
and
do
I don't
love
mind
it,
doing it a lot, and I think the girls really do like it. But there are some times when, and so that little walk, so allowing yourselves that exercise. I mean, we can now exercise as much as we want, can't we? So I think it would be really advisable, even if you don't want to walk, that you go for a walk, or if your partner goes, you go separately.
Sometimes when we've gone for a walk and I really have wanted to walk fast, because I love to walk fast and ahead, and I think, oh God, I better not, because they're all going to think I'm in a mood or I'm in a, and that's really annoying. So I think that's good that we've said that, because I think not always, but I think sometimes if you say, oh, I'm going to walk around on my own, nobody goes, well, that's weird. Why are you walking on your own?
No, that's really
because
important.
It's the only time that that one might get.
But that said, better that you talk about it and say, do you know what, we might walk off on our own today, and you say that before, because there is nothing worse than when you go out and someone does just storm off and you are left thinking, oh God, I hope I haven't done anything wrong. It's better to let people know. Look,
somebody broke my heart that messaged us yesterday on Instagram, and she said, we'd asked the question, what you finding difficult in lockdown? She said that my husband won't go for a walk with me ever.
Oh.
Don't you think that's so awful?
Yeah, I mean, that's the other side.
I mean, that's the only thing that you can see. With that, I would write a note and say, I just wish you would. I just think back to when we were first together, you would have walked with me. Can't we just use this time to try and get our marriage better than it was before we went into lockdown? Yeah. But unfortunately, some people are going to just have to decide that their relationship doesn't work, I suppose, and that's that.
Yeah. Well, there you go, guys.
Difficult. I think we should do, are you worried about your partner is drinking in lockdown?
Okay, yeah.
Really
any other suggestions, guys, leave them below
for
what you think we could be talking about in these strange times. It's a bit like our Confessions of a Modern Parent podcast that we do. It seems a bit trite to be discussing stuff not through the lens of this remarkably unprecedented situation that we're going through.
I can't believe you said unprecedented.
I've always got to get it in everywhere. Please subscribe, please like, please leave comments. Stay safe, everyone. Yeah. And
get plenty of sleep, eat well.
And go for a walk separately, but maybe together.